Uh, now, I welcome Alexander Boden here. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everyone.
I'm here.
Yeah, hi. And before, to just say about Alexander, so he's having 21 years of experience, a business management consultant. His expertise in lean, agile coaching and productivity development expert, and he's having extensive business project management and technical expertise in various startups and listed companies. And he is highly passionate about helping the growth self-organized teams within the organization. And his main key strengths are ability to operate the strategic and operational roles. He got a versatile experience in startups with the various roles and responsibilities. So we welcome you to our SSAG group, Alexander. Alex.
Thank you so much. Can I share my screen? I hope so.
Yeah, sure. You can take the control. All yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the great introduction. And wait, this would be better. No, that's all have to work. Okay. Can you see my screen okay? Is it clear for everyone?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thanks for the quick introduction. I won't spend too much time introducing myself. I do come from South Africa originally, and I live now in Germany. And as Srijana has said, I've had extensive experience in so many different spaces, different cultures, etc. And it's always brought me to the point where I've always thought, okay, how do we actually help people work better together? This is one of my driving passions. How do we bring the best out in people? And with that being said, though, let's talk about our topic, which really is about this idea of AI and business agility for today. And I really want to focus on this idea of what do high-performing teams as a concept or as an idea bring to business agility. And of course, how does GenAI, or who knows how long GenAI will be the thing? Everything changes so quickly. We'll just talk about AI perhaps soon. How does that actually help us? How do tools like this actually help high-performing teams to stay high-performing or go to the next level? And I just really want to share some best practices, some ideas today, things that I've been using, and also ideas that I've taken out of teams that I've been working with in the last while. And really, sorry, I don't know why, but that just jumped ahead. But really, just to start off, I want to look at this idea of business agility. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever looked at this book by Michael Hugos, and he actually did a very good expose on this idea of business agility and broke it down to 3 systemic loops working together, okay? And I'm not going to go too much into this right now, but the key ideas here are on loop 3, you have your typical build, measure, learn loop. Loop 2 is all about Kaizen or continuous improvement, okay? And then an overall loop, which is talking about this general idea of more of a strategic perspective, taking insights from the things that an organization is learning from the teams and drawing all those insights up to a space where strategic decisions can be made. And all of these things working together really help an organization to become agile and really achieve business agility. Now, what's interesting for us is, and the area I'll be focusing more on today is this loop 3, the typical build, measure, learn discussion. Of course, loop 2 is important, Kaizen, and of course the awareness side, which is more on the strategic side. But I really want to just focus on this space and really talk about what it is that we're actually trying to achieve when we're wanting to work with high-performing teams, becoming faster and more effective using generative AI. What is it that we're actually doing? Is, as our previous speaker was actually saying, he was talking about this idea of speeding up. Okay, of course, flexibility and improvement are important, but all of those, at the end of the day, what is generative AI bringing to us? Okay, it's actually causing this whole feedback loop, this whole process from the time we actually build something to the point where we actually deliver and to the point where we actually get feedback from customers and feed that back into our backlog. That whole process is essentially speeding up at such a rate to the point where actually the long process isn't going to be any more building things. I think this is what's going to happen with AI, is that actually the building part's going to be the quick part, okay? The real slow part is actually all the interactions that are going to need to take place within an organization, different groups of people, etc., and also getting feedback from the market. Those are the actual spaces that are going to be slow now. And with that in mind, the question is, well, then how do we actually speed up those processes as well? And I'm just taking the idea of a team in general and looking at it and starting from scratch. If we're starting with a team that we want to become high performing and a team that's going to leverage the benefits of generative AI, you want to start already at that point of team forming. Now, so many teams I've worked with always skip this, almost generally, they always skip this stage, okay? And what's going to happen with AI is that actually this idea of people working alone and doing their own thing is going to become even more a liability in the future. And so right from the start, we need to actually get our teams well-founded and collaborating very quickly, because they're going to have to collaborate the whole time with generative AI and actually produce results a lot quicker. This idea of me, sitting alone and working on my computer and developing something, it was already a thing in agile environments where we were like, okay, that's not really going to work. But now it's come to the point where actually, no, that's not just not going to work. It is just not a way of working. It's just ineffective completely and will completely slow you down. So we need to get our teams working effectively from the start. And that means we have to get them well-founded with a good basis, that they can start off with a good foundation and become a very effective team as quickly as possible. And even these processes of team forming, we've seen this already. Generative AI can already assist us here. Often the benefit of doing a team forming exercise is that people can actually actually the benefit comes through the discussions that take place. And what you can actually do is, what it tends to happen is that you gather a lot of data, and then you actually have to simplify it or summarize it into a vision statement or whatever the case is. Generative AI can help you with that and also give you ideas. For instance, you might say, as a working agreement, we want to define our definition of done. You can already use generative AI to say, come, give me a template, And so in this process, instead of it needing to take 2 or 3 days, which you usually use for something like this, you can reduce this down to a day, because you can just move faster in terms of the team forming side. But you need to use your intuition as a human to balance out how fast do we actually create content for our team forming versus making sure we have the right discussions as people, so the real bonding takes place and the real understanding takes place of one another. Okay, enough said on that. So we've got the typical double diamond, a process that many teams use to deliver software or deliver product or increments of product. And this is typically what most teams are using. And generally, it's not bad. But the problem I see, what tends to happen, is that many make the mistake of splitting out discovery from implementation, okay? That they end up having almost like 2 teams. You have the designer and product owner, and then you have the actual development team. And what tends to happen is that these are actually, they end up, often you have a lot of politics, and there's a lot of silos that tend to develop because people are actually wanting to control the process. The product owner might think, oh, well, this is my product, which is correct, but goes to the extreme where they want to control all the decisions, and then actually tends to go off with the designer to do the whole discovery process. And what tends to happen is, from the get-go, you just have dreadful silos that develop, okay? And the reality is that, as I've said now, is that, you might have gotten away with this in the past because the development cycles were a lot slower. But with generative AI, the people processes are now becoming the bottleneck. And as soon as you have too much politicking going on in a process, as soon as you have silos, these are going to become the main bottlenecks in your process, not so much the development anymore, because we're going to be able to develop at a much faster rate. And so in the past, people were like, oh, well, there's politics in every organization. It's okay, because it might not have had such a major impact on the development process cycle, the speed of delivery. Now we're getting to the point where actually it's a major blocker. And in fact, it actually can account for most of the waste in your process. And so you're going to have to really address that from the get-go. And so what do we do is pull people into the process. Designers should not be going off on their own to go and talk with end users about what needs to be delivered. Our developers are going to have more time theoretically that they shouldn't, with AI, and that they don't have to, there's a lot of time saving that takes place in developing the code. They actually have potentially more time to better understand the business domain and go and talk with the actual end users and actually be a part of this process from the beginning. Okay. And so this discovery process can actually be something more almost akin to pair programming or mob programming, where you can actually do some mob discovery or pair discovery with the designer and the product owner and one or two devs. You really want to make sure that we're doing this together now, because actually AI is going to give us the chance and the ability to do that. And this is what I'm suggesting to teams, is to get rid of these silos and actually really work as a team. The other nice thing is that we can already start getting really fast feedback with our click dummies, and various other things, and platforms that we can actually deliver something very quickly. And even with AI, it just goes a lot faster. You can generate text, visuals, and even little apps very quickly. And the nice thing about that is we can do that whole build, measure, learn cycle very fast. And so we can leverage generative AI to achieve that. Here's the thing, though, is that we need to then work as a team. So you still need input from your developers and designers and product owners to get this click dummy set up and move it fast and move it, ship it, or get it in front of an end user to get feedback. Okay. So having gone through that discovery phase, then we move into the define phase. And the define phase is where we start to, of course, actually bring and converge our ideas into a clear focus of what we actually want to build. And one of the processes that I really like the work of Roman Pichler. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but I use his work a lot. And, when you've gathered lots of ideas and understood the problem, you can begin to build a product vision board, such as this here. And even here, generative AI can help you speed up the process. One of the things that generative AI is really great at is, believe it or not, building personas. And they can deliver, can get some really great personas out of your ChatGPT that you can, immediately, very quickly then use to just build up your set of personas that you can use for stories, etc. And so really, all of these steps along the way for a high-performing team, if they leverage these tools well together and collaborate well, they're just going to speed up many of the typical business processes as well that they're involved in. This also comes back to the discussion around roadmaps. Now, for me, high-performing teams are teams that focus on impact and not outcomes. The typical roadmaps I so often see are still very similar to Gantt charts. And, they actually don't really deliver value and end up also driving discussions with stakeholders that are typically irrelevant and useless, where people debate with stakeholders about colors of buttons and features, and not discussing and really understanding what are the goals we want to achieve. Are we on track to reaching those goals? And then deciding out of that space, okay, what features do we need to reach those goals? Those types of discussions don't happen. And many teams never become high-performing teams and impactful teams because they don't have the right tools that they're using. They're focusing on being a feature factory and not on the goals that they actually want to achieve together with stakeholders. So include the entire team. The challenge for you as a as an agile coach is you're going to need to moderate very strongly. Okay, you're going to have some very strong opinions in the room, and this is the area that you're probably going to really have to grow at the most, because we're going to be reducing these silos that were okay in the past are going to be decreasing more and more. And we're going to be able to have meetings where you're going to potentially have CEOs in the room with your developers or whatever the case is. and you are thrashing out where we're going with this product, and you're going to need to moderate very strongly. And so definitely upskilling in the area of facilitation, professional facilitation, there will be something beneficial. Moving on from there, as we move into the develop phase, we're managing the backlog for delivery. Okay. And what are we talking about here, which is going to be interesting, is when we're talking about our product backlog, we can think about this idea of, obviously, we want to reduce this build, measure, learn cycle as much as possible. And what does that mean is that we can get generative AI to develop stories for us. And you saw that already from the previous talk. But I just want to reiterate this. This is a great way to start building your backlog. And now, as we've seen in the previous talk, you can use agents to actually start producing the right backlog for you. You're just going to go to the next level and go a lot faster. Okay. The nice thing here is that we can focus on the communication aspect and not wasting time on the technical aspect of developing user stories and backlog. What do I mean by that? How many refinement meetings have you been in where people spend so much time trying to just open the board and write stuff and find the right words for things, etc., and not focusing on the discussion around what needs to happen, okay, around where the product is going and the actual value that they want to deliver? If you take away the wastage of time that comes around, just building and writing text, and more around the discussion and communication that happens in the team, you're going to immediately move the team to a greater level of understanding, which provides a basis for greater performance. So this is something, once again, that we can leverage with GenAI, as well as acceptance tests. Here's an example where I took a story and asked it to write, to provide me with some ATD acceptance tests, which is really great, because I don't know if you've ever tried to write and be consistent in using given, when, then in your acceptance test for a project. It becomes quite cumbersome quite quickly, and there's a lot of test cases you have to then write out by hand. This is a huge time saver and something that we can definitely leverage and keep us just focusing on talking about and understanding what the value is that we're actually trying to achieve. Now, here's the next part, and this is something that is not new at all. But one of the interesting things is I think it's one of the greatest challenges to get teams to implement when it comes to this idea of you want to become a high-performing team. And this has very little to do with generative AI, but honestly, it has a great deal to do with just being agile as a team, but also as agile as a business. And that is the way in which you collaborate. Okay. And one of the things that I've realized is that there are so many Scrum Masters out there and people who are coaching teams, etc., and they don't realize that the greatest impact that they can have, if we look at that sort of 80-20 rule, that you see, is that you have this scenario where so many teams are still working as individuals and not really as teams. Okay. And so this idea that, one of the bases for Scrum to be effective, and Jeff Sutherland has said this so often, and it's not just Scrum, to be honest, any agile team, is in this area of collaboration, of swarming. And I'll talk about this right now, but I just wanted to set the stage. One of the ideas that we have to get free of is this idea that working in parallel on the team level is a good idea, okay? Where everyone pulls their own ticket and runs off and goes and does some work. Now, in the past, you may have gotten away with it. Now with GenAI, honestly, the building part it happens quickly. The real challenge is to make sure that we are actually delivering and getting stuff done, finished, okay, together as a team. And one of the challenges you might say to me is, okay, Alex, why is this an anti-pattern? Well, you can look here at the 12 product wastes. I don't know if you've ever looked at the 12 product development wastes, but there's a whole list here of the type of waste that you have in a team when they're developing a product, okay? And one of the interesting things is some of the key wastes that you have in a team, handoffs, waiting, etc., tend to happen when people are working by themselves, okay? And one of the classic examples, you might say, okay, Alex, this is all very theoretical. I want to talk about some practical example that almost every team I've come across deals with on a daily basis. For some reason in our industry, people have come to believe that pull requests are a great idea, okay? And most teams I work with use pull requests. What they don't understand is just by simply adding this simple task, this aspect into their workflow, they introduce a huge amount of waste into their process. And what do I mean by that? Here's a simple example. You have two people working on two different tickets. And cut a long story short, this ticket, if they were collaborating together, pairing or mobbing or swarming, they could have that ticket maybe done in half a day. But what tends to happen is that the lead time of this ticket gets dragged out over several days because of people, there's this ping pong that happens around improvements and making minor changes, etc., to the actual code or whatever feature that was delivered. And if these people had just simply taken the time to say, how about I pair with you at the end of your ticket for, a day, even half an hour, or let's say a couple of hours until we get it done, then the ticket would be completed within one, let's say half a day or a day. And the second one would be done on the second day. And actually they could already be working on the third or the fourth by the time you would have actually finished both tickets here. Purely because you have waste in terms of context switching and waste in terms of waiting, handoffs, waiting for people. And these things we don't see because people are always busy. We think they're being productive, but they're not working on the right things at the right time. And so we want to move away from that. And I'll just jump ahead here. We want to actually focus on this idea of swarming, okay? Why? Okay, why can we do this? And I've jumped ahead a couple of slides because I'm just looking at the time. Why is it that, what can we actually do to get rid of those wastes? Is number one is, of course, we can't expect that everything can be important at the same time. We've got to get rid of this idea that we have to, everyone, that you might have 2 or 3 stakeholders and they all want someone to be working on their ticket at the same time or immediately and get it done. You're going to have to break that idea. We're going to have to focus as a team. We're going to have to reduce work in progress, and we're going to have to work towards closer collaboration. Okay, so this idea of team versus a group, most teams I've worked with, they often work as groups, everyone working on their own ticket. We're going to have to collaborate a lot closer together. Okay, and so how are we going to do this? We're going to do this, as I said, through swarming. Okay. Now, swarming, why is swarming a great idea? It addresses all our wastes that I spoke about previously, but it also helps people to learn. One of the challenges many teams have is how do they onboard people very quickly into their domain and into the space that they're in? And what happens if these people are fresh out of university? One of the best ways, honestly, is if they swarm, if they're part of a team that does swarming. And the other beautiful thing about doing swarming is you have less integration pain. And obviously, if you like working with people, more fun because you get to share ideas and there's a lot of idea sparring that takes place when you swarm. Okay, so what does this mean? How does it work? Okay, what do I mean by swarming is that actually this occurs when as many team members as possible work on the same priority item together. Okay, now you might say to me, okay, but Alex, is this just a pair programming or whatever the case is? And I'll say to you, no, it's not necessarily. It's about us as a team working on one thing at the same time. Why is this actually interesting? Is because we're going to have a situation, as I've said, with generative AI, we are able to deliver things a lot faster. We're actually able to do the build part a lot quicker. What's more important is that we bring everyone's brains to the table at the same time to share ideas and work on the idea at the same time to deliver value together. Okay, because this is going to actually ultimately, it's not just going to get rid of waste, but we're actually going to unlock the best creativity in the team when they're working on a problem together. And so Sure, it might make sense to maybe say, okay, where we break down into work streams initially, because to do a jump from working on many things at the same time down to one or two things is a huge jump, okay? Then you might want to start with work streams, but ultimately you'd actually like the team working on one thing at the same time, okay? And this can be a very, very interesting thing, especially when you throw generative AI into the discussion. So you might be working on a set of on one feature, and I'm thinking about a vertical sliced feature here. So we're touching every part of the system to deliver it, okay? And what is then interesting is to say, okay, well, maybe there's certain times where it makes sense for me to work alone, and there may also be times when we should pair. Pairing for me is a great idea when, for instance, let's say the front end guys are integrating the front end with the back end through the API. Instead of just, throwing, playing ping pong to say, okay, well, the API is now set up, front end, go for it, build it, connect with it. You can actually say instead now, well, let's build it at the same time together, the front-end components that interact with it, with the API, and the backend itself. Even if that means we actually might end up on the backend side hard coding responses initially, or whatever the case is. But we're swarming, we're working together on a part that actually needs us to work collaboratively on it. And then there's other parts where it doesn't make sense to collaborate, but we're still working on the same thing. Because no matter what happens, it could be something I'm working on the front end and I realize, I'm missing some data that I need in order to actually finish this feature. If the backend guys are working on something completely different, they're going to have to context switch if they're even able to help you at that point. Or you might find that now you're stuck, you're waiting for them to finish something. And then, after a day, they come back to you and maybe you've moved on to another ticket, and then they do something, and then they're like, okay, now you have to change this and this and this. And you have to then context switch yourself, go back and change things. We want to get rid of that. We want to be working on the same thing at the same time. And even if we come to the point where the backend guys are finished, they can help on the front end with testing, with also just being someone who provides ideas, in terms of pairing with that person. And so we really want to move towards this idea of swarming, collaborating, because this is actually going to get rid of a lot of waste. We're going to work more effectively this way. And I also believe, as I've said, with GenAI, we're actually going to need to be collaborating a lot more, because that's where the real value that humans bring will come to the table, okay? It won't be any more so much as, in the actual software development side itself, because we're going to actually be using machines to develop the actual product for us. The more creative aspect and the creative juices will flow when people work together. That is the part that humans will really add value in. And we need to then collaborate as a team and really work effectively accordingly, Okay, so with that being said, I feel this next section is something that my previous speaker did very well. Just talking about how to actually, pair with generative AI. And, one of the things that's very interesting is how it actually transforms your pairing sessions or your mob sessions, because now you actually have an extra person almost in the team. And as you're mob programming, you actually are able to draw insights and get ideas from ChatGPT or your Copilot or whatever it is that you're using. And this is actually, obviously, it speeds things up. But what I find is also interesting is even as you're running a mob session, the typical navigation role becomes interesting, because you might have a driver who's moving the code forward step by step. Also, as I said, maybe getting unit tests, etc., from ChatGPT. But the navigators themselves can also have their laptops open, and they could already start playing with some ideas in terms of where the code is going, and getting insights from generative AI to actually feed back to the driver to speed up that process of delivering, real value as quickly as possible. Now, where I live here in Europe, this is, I don't think necessarily a problem that you have in the States or in in India is that we are not so, I mean, most of the companies we work with are not keen for their code to be fed into any online system, Copilot or whatever the case is. And so one of the big topics where we live is actually around this idea of self-hosting and building something very similar to akin to a, to a Copilot that you can actually use. And this is something that we've been doing, where initially we tried out Tabby, which is an open source project that we weren't that happy with. And ultimately, what we've been working a lot with recently is CodeGBT. I don't know if any of you have used it, with a hosted LLM. So we've actually had like, like an Olama that's hosted in a data center near us, and using that with CodeGBT to actually get the basically the benefits that you would have of Copilot, etc., for the projects. But by doing this, of course, we're making sure that we're not contravening any of the GDPR laws that we have here. And might be something interesting if you guys also face that on your side. Of course, the nice thing about this is obviously the quick wins. I'm a great believer in test-driven development. And I really want to encourage you, especially now that we have these tools with generative AI. And especially, I know I saw one of the questions pop up about the question around how do we actually test if the AI is hallucinating or not. My suggestion is the following, is to use TDD with generative AI. So get it to write, or you write the test and feed it into ChatGPT and then ask it to write the code. And do it in small steps. And by doing this, you can actually verify whether or not the AI is hallucinating or not, okay, very quickly. And so the idea of TDD doesn't go away now that GenAI has arrived, okay? In the same way that a person can easily lose their path when they're coding and, end up in a situation where they've made too many jumps or steps logically, we have the same problem with AI. And so you really need to, I really want to encourage you to use TDD as much as possible, because this way you can actually ensure that you actually deal with a lot of the sort of hallucination problems that tend to rock up with AI. Because I find that from my perspective, I find that as much as I enjoy working with ChatGPT, whenever I'm creating code with it, I see that it hits the border very quickly in terms of what I want to do. And so I need to actually make sure that I'm forcing ChatGPT or whatever it is that I'm using to take baby steps, and making sure that it's well covered with test cases that I understand, to make sure that, the system is not hallucinating. Okay. They also spoke, the previous speaker also spoke about retrieval augmentation generation. I mean, this is more and more a topic, and now it sounds like we've even already jumped over this topic to some degree as we come more and more into these, self-directed agents. But really, what are we talking about here is that what's going to be powerful moving into the future is that AI is going to be able to carry more and more context with it. And hopefully this should then obviously lead to it being able to provide solutions that are more context aware and valid for us. And so, some of the tools that already exist that support this, you've got Copilot and Codium. I don't know if any of you use IntelliJ or, JetBrains, any of the JetBrains tools. Unfortunately, their AI version, it doesn't have that quite yet, but it should be coming soon. And so, definitely that's something to keep your eye on, because that's going to definitely help. Now, where is this all going? As we've said, we've got AI agents, and I don't know if anyone's looked at Devon, but that looks like a very interesting project. Also with, you've got another project, Sakana.ai, where it's actually these AI agents are really doing science. And with Devon, it has a very interesting process. It's almost like you could imagine an agent that's a software developer for you, that you can ask to develop, and actually, as it's building the code and delivering increments, you can give it feedback to improve on that increment and to make changes. And so that's really where we're going with this, the whole idea of with artificial intelligence. However, the challenge I see is you still need humans to check if these things are hallucinating or not. And I can tell you now as much as Devon AI looks very cool and people will think, oh, great, I can get it to build a fantastic application for me, I'm pretty sure in the same way that we had the challenges now, there's going to be a lot of hallucination potential there. And you need to, as a human, you're going to have to direct the machine to work, in basic steps, and to work in small steps, and to verify those steps and make sure that it's writing the right tests, to make sure that, that those tests are actually covering exactly what needs to be checked. You're going to need people to provide that input. And I don't see that going away anytime soon. I just think, as we said, it's only what will happen is that our ability to deliver will speed up. So as we move into the deliver phase of our double diamond, as I've said, the human testing part is probably going to be super crucial. We're going to be the ones coming up with creative ideas of what this machine should build for us. But in the same way, we're going to have to become very good at checking the results of what the machine is building, okay? And that's not going to go away. And as I've said, this idea of collaboration is also going to be super important here. This idea of having a tester in the team who does the testing by themselves. I mean, already in the agile world, we didn't like this idea. But even moving forward now, it's going to be even more important for stakeholders and team members to be verifying the results of what the machine builds. Okay, so we're going to be needing to work very closely together once again. And those silos are going to need to be removed outside of the team as well, but also with the team and the rest of the business. Okay. Another great thing that I really like with generative AI is one of the problems many teams have is getting valid metrics or data on the impact of the work that they've done. And often it's not because the data doesn't exist. It's often because the data is messy, okay? And one of the great things with generative AI, but of course it needs to be verified by humans, is using it to actually clean up messy data, as well as using it to build scripts that can help you build dashboards, etc. If you're in Google, using Google Workspaces, it's great for building Google App scripts that can help you create some great charts from the data. And so one of the great things here is the feedback cycle, where often it could take a very long time to take that data from users and actually turn it into some legible, insights. We can already here use generative AI to help us speed up that process. Okay, so what's the conclusion of the matter? What are we actually trying to do here? As I said before, is we're trying to actually reduce this process and actually squash it, okay? And in any good agile team, I mean, this is something we've known for years, is that actually we want to be doing discovery together. We want to work in small steps together. We want to work as a team. But now really it's going to become crucial in the generative AI time, and if we want to become truly agile or, achieve business agility, we're going to have to make sure that this diamond gets squashed together and that we work in much smaller cycles and move away from almost, for me, if I look at this by itself, it looks very much like a waterfall process. But if you move it and if you squash it and make it iterative, then, you're actually becoming more agile. And that's really what we want to do as we leverage AI tools, is get rid of waste, reduce those processes, and also as we collaborate better together. However, what's key is sustainability and quality. No matter what happens, as much as we want to speed up, we need to also leverage a generative AI in our collaboration to make sure that we sustain a high level of quality and we move at a pace that is sustainable for all. Okay, for all the people involved. And once again, AI, great, as we've seen, we can use it to write test cases, etc. And what's also great is as we work more as a team, collaborate better together, we can also have a better understanding of the needs on the quality side, and make sure that we all take ownership of that together. So where does that leave us? With GenAI and swarming allows actually at the end of the day for faster feedback loops. We're just going to be much faster that way. And I really just want to encourage you guys, think about taking swarming, link it with generative AI and build it into your team processes. With this together, we can really become, you can really generate some, help build high performing teams. And with generative AI, we're just going to see, obviously, that we're going to become faster and faster and faster as we go. Thank you for listening to my talk. And as you said, as our previous speaker said, if you're keen to connect, reach out to me on LinkedIn. It'd also be great to connect with you. And do you have any questions? I see there were some questions.
Yeah. Yes, Alex, we do have one question here. So says that how to check the relevance of test cases then Gen AI creates with respect of the business needs.
So this is where, as I said, this is the importance of doing pairing as or even mob discovery. If there's only one person who understands the business domain and they're not involved in the process of actually generating test cases, etc., then obviously you're not going to be able to verify it. But if you guys are working well as a team and everyone understands the business domain, whatever gets delivered will have a couple of eyes. The 4 eyes principle, we can actually extend that maybe to 10 eyes or 12 eyes who are actually looking at those test cases. And the nice thing is, because we don't have to generate them from scratch ourselves, we can take a bit more time to actually look at them, verify if they make sense or not, and adjust accordingly. Okay. Cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, yes, Alex, thank you for that. So key metrics through which we can measure the high performance teams and acknowledge that the teams are improving consistently. Please share how we can.
Yes. So, I mean, originally what people would do out of the Scrum position, you have the whole idea of velocity, etc., which is on the one side, okay, all right. It's a good start to start with that. But then we moved on to, the fourth, what do they call them? The I've just gone the Fab Four. I know them as the Fab Four metrics. But have you heard of the Fab Four metrics from Accelerate? Those metrics, the Dora metrics. Does that ring a bell? I don't know. Sorry, who actually asked the question?
Hey, Alex, Sharath here. I have asked the question.
Yes. So, do you know about the Dora metrics from Accelerate? The book
Dora.
Accelerate.
Yeah.
I really recommend having a look at those. They're very effective at actually helping you to decide if you're a high-performing team or not. And they're based on metrics there was a very lengthy research that was done at companies like Google, etc. And that's where actually these metrics come from. And there was a group of people, actually, I don't know the name of the group originally, but they actually did research in the top tech companies, and they realized, and as they did the research, they realized that these were the key metrics that helped them to decide on what are the what actually makes out a high performing team. And some of the key things you look at there are your lead times and cycle times. You're looking at a mean time to recovery for systems. That do you have? Does the team, are they able to really quickly recover from from a setback? And there was also there's mean time to change and various other metrics there that you can have a look at. So those are good. But here's the thing: you can have a high-performing team if you just look at efficiency, how quickly these people produce code. I mean, that's, as we see even with AI, that's obviously going to speed up a lot. The real question is, are they building the right thing? And that for me is also a key part of a high-performing team. It's not so much how fast are they, but are they building the right thing? Are they making an impact with what they're building? And that discussion is something that, as much as you can leverage generative AI to support you in, as I've said, in testing ideas, etc., a real high-performing team that collaborates well, where they're talking a lot with each other, product owner and devs and designers are working closely together, and they are actually producing things that the market wants. That's really going to be the interesting thing to look at in terms of whether a team is high-performing. And so then the next question comes is actually you want to look at the business impact. So how much money is this product making? Are you reaching your goals, your business goals in terms of market share, etc.? How sustainable are you reaching them? Are you having a lot of turnover based on the product? And all those things. And what is the net promoter score, for instance? Do people like your product? Are they actually promoting it to other people? Those types of discussions then become interesting. Cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, please raise your hands so that we can unmute you to ask the question. Anyone?
The one thing I would suggest, and this for me is one of the most important things, if you take away, is really I know that many organizations don't support it, but honestly, I think also in the era of generative AI, we've got to get swarming right in our teams. This is so important. And if you take one thing away from this discussion, not even the generative AI aspect, get swarming right, because that will actually be the key for the future in terms of becoming really, in terms of business agility, is swarming. Okay. Sorry, good. Enough said.
Yeah, I think Srijana, we don't have much questions. Let's move forward.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Alex. So we are grateful for sharing your expertise in business agility and Gen AI with us. So your insights on Double Diamond designed sustainability and quality and anti-patterns, 12 product development wastage, swarmings, etc. So we appreciate your time and willingness to share the knowledge, contributing to our understanding the growth. Thank you for your valuable time. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you don't mind, but I also need to drop off. But please stay in touch and reach out to me if you have any other questions on LinkedIn. Great. Thank you.
Just one moment,
Alex,
Alexander.
Yeah, just sharing the token. 1 second. Token of appreciation. So you can able to see my screen, right, Alex? Hello?
No.
Unfortunately, not right
yet,
now.
Srijana. Yeah, now it's coming out slowly.
No?
No, Srijana.
No worries. I can share. Not a problem.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot,
Excellent.
Alexander.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.